This game is the only, just the one, no more, that's it, three-dimensional roguelike that I have ever come across. It's unique, challenging, frustrating, rewarding, confusing, and above all else, highly addictive. Risk of Rain 2 is one of the simplest roguelikes out there because it doesn't attempt to supplement quality with sheer quantity and size. There are few enough stages that you can name them all off the top of your head, enemies that after an hour of playtime have you fully acquainted with their hobbies, interests, and the rest of their family when they've practically invited you round for dinner. And of course, the plethora of detailed and interesting items that, regardless of how many there seem to be at first, you very quickly begin to understand how they work on a much more comprehensive level, such as, drugs make me shoot faster, whips make me run faster, and a substance addiction is cured by consistent and unquestioning indulgence, and this is what Risk of Rain has always been. So what's it about? Put short, you run around, shoot things, preferably enough times to kill them before you become a little toastier than most people would find desirable, wait for a little while to have enough money to satisfy your chest opening addiction, get some items, proceed to the set of horns poking out of the ground with a very unsuspicious sacrificial dish in the center, scream as the ground beneath your feet shakes uncontrollably before a behemoth much bigger than you bargained for rises from the earth to try and give you a very in-depth prostate examination. Eventually kill the boss, hopefully before it incinerates you with its loving and potentially lethal gaze. Realize that you spent the last 2.5 minutes forgetting to inflate your lungs with much needed oxygen. Take a deep breath before moving your tiny legs faster than they've ever gone before towards the nearest set of what are probably not mimics. Be sorely disappointed with your lack of funds and then proceed to the next stage. But it's not over yet! Once you get to the next stage, you don't have enough time to think before you're already launching yourself towards the nearest set of juicy, delectable, irresistible loot sources before finally realizing that your previous monetary predicament from the last stage is most certainly still in effect, and you must now wait until enough floaty laser heads appear so that you can slaughter them and feed at least one of the potential mimics lodged in the ground with your cold hard cash. Or you could just
sell your blood to Mother Earth to reach a higher state of existence.
Having satiated your ever-increasing need to see your item bar expand and your wallet funds deplete, you decide that you've spent far too long watching the difficulty increase and you need to move on before making the exact same mistake you did last time. And oh god, what the fuck is that? So who created it? This daily dosage of dopamine and questionable life lessons was developed and improved upon by a three-man studio known as Hoppo Games. This ragtag crew have created 3 games that they advertise on their website, 2 of which being Risk of Rain titles and the third being a game called Deadbolt. Only one of these games has been rendered in 3 dimensions and has been a dramatic shift from the consistent and Metroidvania-like style of the other 2. Or, in other words,
where did all the squares go?
They're here. Look, I found them. They're right here, you stupid git! Risk of Rain 2 was an impressive change from what this studio was comfortable with, and I'd like to think that this change has pushed them to take on more risks in their development to explore new and game-changing ideas.
We want new characters!
This opinion was supported by a fan poll, making the next character introduction something that hasn't been seen before, and Hoppo's response to this was one that was memorable and inspiring. So why was it created? This game is unsurprisingly a sequel to the original title.
No shit, asshole!
The biggest change is being that the game has been rendered completely differently, and thus the style of gameplay also changed quite a lot. However, a lot of enemies, characters, stages, and items are present in both games, and this is certainly not a bad design choice by any stretch. The shift in presentation and game engine, however, has made such a dramatic change in the game's feel and overall experience that comparing Risk of Rain 2 to its predecessor would be unfair by most accounts. While I can't compare them side by side, I can say this: if you're looking for which one to play, pick the second. From a content standpoint alone, Hoppo Games have worked their asses off to create something that only improves upon what they had already built as a foundation, and they by no means failed in this endeavor. In other words,
sell your blood to the Steam Wallet gods.
Seriously though, it's like $20. Just do it. You're trapped at home in quarantine right now, what else would you be doing with your life? As I previously mentioned, this game looks very different from the original style of game making that Hoppo has previously demonstrated. And yes, there is less squares, you absolute moron! Not only is the resolution of the game vastly higher than its predecessor, but the visual impact of the game is very unique in its own way. The surfaces and materials that the landscape seem to be made of appear otherworldly to start off with, and yet they should realistically all be surfaces that we're intimately familiar with. There's rocks, dirt, grass, sand, stone, snow, whatever the fuck this thing is. Okay, those aren't something that we'd be seeing very often on Earth. But still, no matter how you look at this game's aesthetic, it always appears alien, which is rather unsurprising given that every humanoid character wears a fucking helmet. So we've already established that the game is meant to feel alien while also being easy and simple to understand. But what about the way the textures and objects blend together? Seamlessly. They blend together seamlessly. Nothing looks out of place at all, and it's very impressive given that there are things like these altars spread across the map that have virtually no similarities with one another other than the glowing symbols at the top, and even those have different colors. So why doesn't this look weird? Is this some otherworldly god? Why does this one look like a fucking tree? The music for both Risk of Rain and its sequel was created by Christodoulou. Christodoulou? Chris, who hails from fucking Sparta, and if there's anything to be said about how the music makes this game feel, is that it never lets you escape the notion that you're constantly going to be in some form of danger and that you're not supposed to be here. But not in a bad way. See, the music to me follows a sort of pattern, where it increases in intensity, seemingly endlessly. The music will slowly build up the number of sounds and tracks playing at one time, to the point at which they start adding these extremely ominous sounding drums that lead to this very impressive but also very intense sense of urgency, only to have the tracks virtually flatten to an almost hollow feeling, but for some inexplicable reason the intensity never seems to fade. There are points in some of the tracks where the drums and beat of the music are completely out of sync, and while this doesn't follow the traits of common Western music, it doesn't feel off or out of place. Quite the opposite. It fits the setting perfectly. It feels as though, depending on which parts of the piece that you choose to focus on, these desynced rhythms can either feel comfortable or very jarring. This dissonance is brilliant, and I believe it's one of the main cruxes that help remind you that you aren't supposed to be here. So how does the game feel? This game wastes no time in making you feel like you're in a hurry right from the word go. There's a timer that only increases up in the top right hand side of the screen, and as the time and stages change, so does this ominous difficulty scale that goes from easy to ICU to Needless to say, I'm going to need to get my heart rate checked after this, because not only does the difficulty go up with every millisecond that passes, but this is immediately noticeable with how many enemies begin to appear on screen and start targeting you like you're some mindless clay pigeon used for testing turrets at aperture fucking science.
So you're against the clock, right? Wouldn't that make speedrunning tactics, like, really powerful?
What are you talking about? You need to speedrun this game, or your legs will get blown off and your body will become molded to the terrain like a piece of modern art. Honestly, if you choose to play on Drizzle, then this game becomes a lot more forgiving and you certainly feel less rushed off the whole. But I feel like this game shines most on Monsoon. It's borderline unfair the level at which you need to perform at in order to finish a single run on this difficulty. You need to know exactly when you have the ability to progress to the next stage effectively, because it's no longer a matter of get as many items as you can, but depending on which items you manage to get your grubby little space mittens on, you can either progress at a decent time, or flail your arms around wildly and pray that the wisps don't find you. And that's just the items. You have to worry about movement, placement, accuracy, damage mitigation, crowd control, and almost all forms of min-maxing just to get past the first 3 stages.
And those are the easy ones!
Once you hit stage 4 at around the 20-minute mark, things begin to get a lot more difficult and very quickly. At this point, panic begins to set in as you realize that you still don't have enough pocket change to feed the nearest what I'm almost certain is a mimic, and hope to God it gives you something useful and not another fucking shield generator. Verdict: play this game.